The storage room at the Four Seasons Hotel hummed with the distant sounds of my father's 65th birthday celebration. I sat on a folding chair, surrounded by stacked chairs and extra tablecloths, while my sister Victoria's carefully orchestrated party played out in the grand ballroom. "Dinner will be served soon, Emma," Victoria announced from the doorway, her Dior gown a stark contrast to the utilitarian space. "Try not to make noise back here. The important guests might hear you." I smoothed down my simple black dress, a one-of-a-kind piece from a designer even Victoria couldn't access. "Of course, Victoria. We wouldn't want to disturb your perfect party. The servants' quarters suit you," she smirked, glancing around the storage room. "Though I suppose it's better than your usual, what do you call it? Your office?" My phone buzzed silently. A message from Marcus, my chief operations officer. "Sterling Industries acquisition of Global Tech complete. $8.2 billion deal finalized. Waiting for your signature on final documents." I smiled, thinking about the office Victoria mocked, the entire top floor of Sterling Tower, with a view that made this hotel look like a budget motel. But here I sat, playing the role of failing daughter while my sister orchestrated what she thought was the social event of the season. "Victoria," my mother's voice carried from the hallway. "The Richardsons are asking about Emma. I told them she's indisposed." "Good save, Mother," Victoria replied. "We can't have people knowing she's actually here. It would ruin the whole atmosphere." The atmosphere had cost a fortune: crystal chandeliers, premium champagne, and enough flowers to fill a botanical garden. What they didn't know was that I owned the hotel through one of Sterling Industries' subsidiaries. Every penny they'd spent on this extravagant display had ultimately gone into my company's accounts. My father's voice boomed from the ballroom. "My daughter Victoria has made the Morgan name proud. She understands real business, real success." Real success. I checked my latest net worth update. $12.4 billion as of this morning. Victoria's entire year's salary as a bank VP wouldn't cover my daily investment returns. "Still playing with your little tech startup?" Victoria's husband Brad appeared, champagne in hand. "You know, my bank is always looking for entry-level positions. Something more stable." I thought about the meeting I'd had with Brad's bank CEO last week, where they'd begged for a chance to handle Sterling Industries accounts. "Thanks, Brad. I'll keep that in mind." "Emma," my mother reappeared, "please try to stay quiet. Victoria has the governor sitting near this wall, and we can't have any disturbances." The governor, who'd called me 3 times this week about state technology contracts. If they only knew that their embarrassing daughter was the mysterious CEO their social circle desperately tried to meet. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, legal team standing by. Global Tech board ready for final signatures. Also, your father's company just tried to bid on the Richardson contract." The Richardson contract. A $500 million technology infrastructure project that my father's company thought they had locked down. They didn't know that Sterling Industries had already won it, or that their failing daughter would be announcing it next week. "Look at her," I heard Victoria tell our mother outside. "Sitting in storage while we celebrate. Maybe this will finally make her understand that tech dreams don't equal real success." Real success. Like the artificial intelligence platform Sterling had developed, or the quantum computing patents that had revolutionized the industry. But here I sat, surrounded by spare chairs, playing the role they'd assigned me. "Emma," my father's voice carried through the wall. "If you're going to hide back there, at least make yourself useful. The hotel needs more champagne brought up." Victoria stuck her head in again. "You heard Daddy. At least you can manage carrying boxes, right?" I stood up, checking my watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that cost more than Victoria's car. "Of course, sister dear. Anything to help your perfect party." As I moved toward the service elevator, my phone lit up with another message. This one made me pause. "Urgent. Global Tech merger requires CEO signature immediately. Legal team en route to your location." I smiled, thinking about the chaos that was about to unfold. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they never saw coming. The service elevator hummed as I made my way back up with cases of champagne that I technically owned. Through my earpiece, Marcus was updating me on the Global Tech situation. "Legal team is 5 minutes out, Miss Sterling. The merger documents require immediate attention. The Asian markets open in 3 hours." Victoria was waiting when the elevator doors opened, her perfect features arranged in a practiced look of disdain. Finally, the governor was asking where his champagne was. Though I suppose this is the kind of work you're used to. If she only knew that I'd declined a dinner invitation from the governor last week because I was too busy acquiring global tech. Her precious banking connections would seem rather insignificant compared to my reality. Miss Sterling, Marcus's voice came through again. Your father's company just lost the Richardson bid. They're not taking it well. Through the storage room's door I could hear my father's booming voice. What do you mean we lost the contract? To whom? Sterling Industries? Who the hell runs that company anyway? The irony was delicious. 4 years, my father had tried to meet Sterling Industries' mysterious CEO, never knowing she was the daughter he'd banished to storage rooms and service elevators. Emma, my mother hissed, appearing suddenly. Stop dawdling with that phone. Victoria needs those bottles distributed properly. This isn't one of your little tech meetings. My little tech meetings had revolutionized 3 industries this year alone. Sterling Industries' market cap had just hit $50 billion, while my father's company was struggling to maintain its modest position. Brad says your startup is looking for investors, Victoria smirked, adjusting her diamond necklace, a pale imitation of the collection sitting in my private vault. Maybe if you're nice he'll throw some spare change your way. My phone buzzed. A message from our PR team, global tech merger news ready to break. Your identity as Sterling Industries CEO will be revealed simultaneously. All major networks standing by. Miss Sterling, Marcus interrupted. Legal team has arrived at the hotel. They're heading to the service entrance as instructed. I checked my watch again. Perfect timing. Through the ballroom doors I could see my father holding court, probably bragging about Victoria's latest achievements, while dismissing my existence. The servants' quarters suit you, Victoria repeated, watching me arrange champagne bottles. Though I suppose someone has to do the real work while the successful people celebrate. Successful people. I thought about the meeting I'd had yesterday with world leaders about Sterling's new clean energy technology. About the contracts worth billions that bore my signature. About the empire I'd built while they thought I was finding myself. Emma, my father's voice boomed. Where's that champagne? The governor is waiting. Coming, father, I called back, but before I could move the storage room door burst open. Thomas Wright, our chief legal counsel, rushed in, followed by a team of lawyers and executives. Miss Sterling. Thank God we found you. The global tech merger. We need your signature immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her perfectly manicured fingers, shattering against the floor. Sterling, she whispered. Thomas continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding. The Asian markets open soon, and the $8.2 billion merger needs to be finalized. As CEO of Sterling Industries, your signature is required immediately. $8 billion. My mother choked out. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my designer dress. Of course, Thomas. The merger documents. The legal team spread the papers across a folding table, right next to the spare tablecloths and chair covers. Through the open door, I could see my father frozen in mid-conversation, his face draining of color as he processed what he was hearing. You're the CEO of Sterling Industries? Victoria's voice had risen several octaves. The Sterling Industries that just won the Richardson contract? I picked up the Mont Blanc pen Thomas offered, a gift from the Japanese Prime Minister after our last technology partnership. The very same. Though I suppose this storage room isn't really the proper place for an $8.2 billion merger signing. Shall we move this to my hotel's presidential suite? Your hotel? My mother stammered. Oh, didn't Victoria tell you? I own the Four Seasons, along with most of the properties in this city, including, I believe, the building where your bank is headquartered, Brad. The sound of running feet announced my father's arrival. He stood in the doorway, face ashen, as I signed the final document that would make Sterling Industries the largest technology company in the world. There, I said, signing the final page with a flourish. Thomas, please ensure these reach Hong Kong before the markets open. And have PR ready for the global announcement. The legal team hurried out, leaving me alone with my shell-shocked family in the storage room that had suddenly become the most interesting place in the hotel. Through the open door I could see curious party guests gathering, drawn by the commotion. All this time, my father's voice cracked. While we thought you were struggling with some small startup, I built an empire, I finished for him. Sterling Industries. 12 subsidiaries. Operations in 43 countries. Current market capitalization. I checked my phone, just hit $52 billion after the global tech merger. Victoria had collapsed into a folding chair, her perfect composure shattered. But you take the bus to work. You live in that tiny apartment. The bus company? I own it. Testing our new autonomous transportation systems. I smiled. And that tiny apartment is the entire top floor of Sterling Tower. The building your bank tried to lease space in last month. My mother stepped forward, switching to her social damage control voice. Darling, why didn't you tell us? We're family. We could have. Could have what, mother? Supported me? Like when you banned me from family dinners because my failure might embarrass Victoria? Or when you made me use service entrances at family events? Miss Sterling, Marcus's voice came through my earpiece. Global tech announcement is live. All major networks breaking the story. Also, your father's company's stock just dropped 30% on news of the lost contracts. The ballroom screens flickered to life, displaying breaking news headlines. Sterling Industries acquires global tech in $8.2 billion deal. Mysterioso revealed. Emma Sterling emerges as tech's most powerful leader. Sterling Industries' net worth soars to $15.4 billion. My God, Brad whispered, frantically checking his phone. The Sterling account. My bank has been trying to get that for years. Yes, about that. I turned to him. Your pitch last month? Rejected. Though I particularly enjoyed your comment about my little tech hobby during the presentation. Victoria found her voice, though it trembled. The Richardson contract. Daddy's company. Lost it to Sterling Industries, yes. I adjusted my simple black dress, which suddenly everyone in the room recognized as a one-of-a-kind piece. Along with the next 5 major contracts they were bidding on. Emma, my father stepped forward, his banker's instincts kicking in. Surely we can work together now. The family name. The family name? I laughed. The one you said I was embarrassing? The one that couldn't be associated with tech dreams. I gestured to the screens showing Sterling Industries stock soaring. I built my own name, father. One that's worth considerably more than yours now. My phone buzzed again. Governor asking for an urgent meeting, Marcus reported. Also, the Asian markets are responding to the merger. Your net worth just increased by another $1 billion. Speaking of names, I continued, you might want to update the party's seating chart. It seems the governor would prefer to sit with the CEO of Sterling Industries rather than in Victoria's carefully arranged social hierarchy. Victoria flinched. The seating took weeks to plan. Yes, well, things change. I smiled. Like your husband's bank? It's now owned by one of my subsidiaries. That promotion you were bragging about earlier, Brad? I'm afraid that position no longer exists. The storage room had become strangely crowded as party guests pressed forward, trying to get a glimpse of the daughter they'd dismissed transformed into one of the world's most powerful CEOs. Miss Sterling, Sarah, my personal assistant, appeared. Your helicopter is ready on the roof. The Global Tech Board is waiting in Singapore. Helicopter, my mother whispered. Of course. You didn't think I actually took the bus to work, did you? Well, except when testing our technology. I gathered my things, including the Mont Blanc pen that had just signed an $8.2 billion deal next to spare tablecloths. Before I go, I paused at the door. Victoria, about the party budget? I'm afraid the hotel rates just tripled. Special CO surcharge. I winked. Bill me for the storage room though. It's been enlightening. As I walked toward the elevator, the main one this time, I heard Victoria's faint voice. All those times we made her use the service entrance. Oh, and father? I called back. Happy birthday. Consider this my gift, a lesson in what real success looks like. The elevator doors closed on their stunned faces, and I ascended toward my waiting helicopter. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's letting them serve themselves the humble pie they never knew they were baking. Sarah, I said as we reached the roof, send them each a copy of tomorrow's Wall Street Journal. I believe the headlines storage room to boardroom. How Emma Sterling built a $52 billion empire might make interesting reading at their next family dinner. After all, some parties are worth waiting for, especially when you own the venue. As the helicopter lifted off from the hotel's rooftop, I watched through the window as my family remained huddled in that storage room, their perfect party forgotten. Sarah handed me a tablet showing live social media reactions to the revelation. Your sister's banking colleagues are already jumping ship, she noted with a smile. And Brad's bank shares have dropped 40% since the announcement that Sterling Industries owns their major assets. Miss Sterling, Marcus's voice came through the helicopter's communication system. Your father just tried to reach you through 5 different channels. Also, Victoria has been removed from the governor's private dinner list next week. I thought about all the times they'd hidden me away during family events, all the storage rooms and service entrances, all the dismissive comments about my little tech hobby. Now those same storage rooms would become part of business legend, the unlikely launching pad for one of the world's most powerful CEOs. One last thing, I told Sarah as Singapore's lights appeared on the horizon. Send a maintenance crew to that storage room tomorrow. Have it renovated into the Sterling Suite, the hotel's most exclusive space. After all, some rooms deserve a promotion just like some daughters. And the bill for tonight's party? Sarah asked. Send it to Victoria, I smiled. With a note, from the storage room with love. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's redecorating it.
If you show up, we may not open the door. That's what my mother said to me 3 days before Christmas. Anger, not with heat. Just that slow, low voice she uses when she wants to sound reasonable, when she wants to hurt you and pretend she didn't. It was nearly midnight in Asheville. I had just walked home through the sleet, my navy scrubs damp at the cuffs, breath still fogging the air. My one-bedroom apartment smelled faintly of pine and peppermint. I had plugged in my little thrift store tree that morning, the same one I'd kept since nursing school, now blinking quietly in the corner. A suitcase sat by the door. Packed days ago, like always, with small thoughtful things I never forgot. The blood orange marmalade Dad liked with his toast, the lavender balm Mom used on her joints. A jigsaw puzzle for Daniel's girlfriend Tessa, who once mentioned loving coastal landscapes, all tied with ribbon and hope. My hands were still shaking from the cold when the phone rang. I smiled automatically when Daniel's name lit up. "Hey, big brother," I said, kicking off my shoes. He hesitated. "Elise," he began, already gentle, already too careful. "So, Tessa's coming to Christmas this year." I blinked. "Okay. She's been working on emotional boundaries lately. Energy stuff. And, well, with your job at the hospice, that energy, it's a lot for her sometimes." He cleared his throat. "So we were thinking, maybe this year you could just take a break." My fingers gripped the phone harder. "You understand, right?" He said quickly. "It's nothing personal." I was about to speak when the other line buzzed. "My mother," I answered. Her voice arrived in that warm, clipped tone she uses when she's wrapping poison in cellophane. "Elise, sweetheart," she said, "we just want peace this year. You know how sensitive Tessa is. If you show up, it could create tension. Honestly, if you come to the house, we may not open the door." I stood there in the dark, the blinking lights of the tree reflecting off the window. My body didn't move, my lips didn't part. The words weren't shocking, just final. They weren't angry, they were done. And I understood something then. I had never been invited. I had just never been told not to come. I ended the call, sat down on the edge of my couch, looked at the gifts, each one wrapped with hands that had washed the dying just hours before. Each one prepared for people who no longer saw me as someone to include, only someone to avoid. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't ask why. Instead, I listened to the silence. A silence I had spent years filling for other people. A silence that had never been mine. I reached for the one thing in my apartment that had always obeyed me. My laptop. I didn't open my laptop out of spite. I opened it out of instinct. The screen lit up with the same dull warmth as always, humming gently against the quiet. My hands moved without thinking. First tab banking, second payments, third family folder. The first thing I canceled was the monthly transfer I'd been sending to Daniel, $800 quietly deposited into his creative development fund. Ever since he'd left his last full-time job to focus on storytelling, I never asked questions. I never wanted him to feel small. Next, my parents' mortgage. I had set up the auto pay 5 years ago after Dad missed 2 property tax notices. I'd told myself it was temporary. It never was. That $400 went out every month, like clockwork. I stopped it with 2 clicks. Insurance, the pickup truck I had helped co-sign when the rates got too high. Dental coverage. The second line on my cell phone plan labeled Dad, all of it severed quietly, neatly, not revenge, just release. I sat back, letting the stillness stretch. A candle flickered beside me, the wax slumped into the glass like a body too tired to hold shape. I remembered that feeling. I'd lived inside it for years. Growing up, I was always the dependable one, the steady daughter, the emotional sponge. I knew how to make casseroles and keep quiet. I knew how to talk gently to someone unraveling. I knew how to step aside, how to not be too loud, too strange, too anything. Daniel was the wild one, the artist, the golden son with mismatched socks and clever excuses. He crashed his car once and got a second chance speech from Dad. I dropped a glass in the sink and got the silent treatment for a week. When I got into nursing school, Mom said, "That's nice, honey, just don't let it turn you into someone cold." When I graduated top of my class, she sent a text thumbs up. When Daniel released a 3-episode podcast about dreams, they hosted a listening party with wine and rosemary focaccia. I once found one of my old hospice journals tucked under their recycling bin, half covered in coupon mailers. No one had opened it. No one had asked. Still, I kept showing up. I drove home every Christmas with pies I baked myself. I repaired broken faucets, changed light bulbs, refilled prescriptions, refolded their shame. I never asked to be thanked, but I suppose I did hope quietly to be noticed. But I wasn't the story they told at parties. I was the quiet one, the background one. The one who held the camera so others could be in the photo. And when they asked me not to come this year, not angrily but softly, like a formality, I realized something sharp and heavy. I had never really been invited to that table. I had just kept pulling up my own chair and hoping no one would notice I closed the laptop. Let the room settle around me. Somewhere across town, they were probably folding napkins and wrapping matching sweaters, preparing a holiday designed to look whole with me. Carefully edited out of the frame, I didn't erase myself. I just finally stopped arguing with the people who had already done it for me. The next morning, I made tea. Cinnamon apple, the kind they always asked for when they came to visit. I let it steep too long, then drank it anyway. The tree in the corner blinked softly in the morning light. I didn't turn it off. I just sat with it like a guest in someone else's apartment. I reached for my notebook. Not the leather-bound one I kept for work, but the spiral one I always meant to throw out. On the first page, I made a list, debts I never asked to be paid back. I wrote them slowly. Daniel's broken laptop replaced with my own bonus, the vet bill when Mom's cat swallowed a ribbon, the time I paid their water bill without being asked because the pipes had already frozen, a plane ticket, a new mattress, a dental crown, a tire rotation. Some of the entries were so small they looked almost silly. Others startled me, not because I'd forgotten them, but because I hadn't realized they belonged on a list I wasn't keeping score. I was keeping record, not to throw it back, but to finally see it for what it was. When the list reached the bottom of the page, I closed the notebook and placed it gently into the freezer. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to preserve the evidence. Or maybe I just liked the thought of it sitting beside the frozen peas, getting colder and colder, while I finally got warm. That night, I unplugged the Christmas lights, not out of sadness, but because I didn't want them blinking at me like questions I no longer had to answer. The wrapped gifts went into the hall closet. Not hidden, just shelved. I might donate them. I might not. Right now, I just didn't want them watching me. I didn't text anyone. I didn't post online. I didn't write a long message about boundaries or betrayal. That wasn't my language. Instead, I filled out a form to remove my name from the shared cell phone plan. I mailed a check to myself for the exact amount of the canceled auto payments, not to cash, just to hold, just to remind myself I could. Then I made dinner. 2 eggs, spinach toast. I ate it slowly while snow pressed against the window like it was trying to get in. For so long, I'd believed love meant covering the cracks, fixing the leaks, making things feel okay. Now I understood maybe too late that some houses aren't meant to be repaired. Some houses are just meant to be left behind. I wasn't angry. Not exactly, but there was something steady rising inside me. Not fire, not even cold, just clearness. Like finally stepping into a room and realizing the door has always been open. I just kept asking for permission to walk through it. They had chosen comfort over connection, appearances over presence, simplicity over truth. I had played along for years, mistaking tolerance for belonging, but now the performance was over. They would gather without me, share meals, take photos, light candles, tell the same stories. They would forget to mention me or mention me carefully with vague regret and tight smiles. She's doing her own thing, they'd say. Work keeps her busy. They wouldn't say they asked me not to come. They wouldn't say they erased me. But this time, I wasn't the one who would keep that secret. I didn't need to confront them. I didn't need to prove anything. Because the truth was already doing its quiet work, and soon it would reach them the way winter does. Soft, certain, unstoppable. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't send an excuse or a quiet apology wrapped in a Hallmark card. I simply didn't go. And for the first time, no one followed up. No, where are you? No, hope, everything's okay. Just silence, polished and practiced. On Christmas morning, I stayed in bed longer than usual. The light outside was soft and gray, the kind that makes the whole street look like it's holding its breath. My phone stayed quiet. I didn't check it. I made oatmeal, added nutmeg and brown sugar. The kitchen felt larger than usual. Later, I sat by the window with a blanket across my knees. No Christmas playlist, no soft choral voices trying to patch things over. Just the hum of my radiator and the distant echo of someone scraping ice off a windshield down the block. It was peaceful, not lonely, just still. That afternoon, I opened a novel I'd started 3 times, but never finished. Got halfway through, made tea, folded laundry, reclaimed every small thing I used to rush through. I didn't think about the party. Not until my phone buzzed. First once, then again, then a third time, I ignored it. I'd muted every group thread weeks ago. But then a message came through separate from the rest. Elise, can you answer? You've done enough damage already. It was from Tessa. Her name pulled something loose in my chest. I called her back. My voice was rough with disuse. What happened? She hesitated. They're saying you ruined Christmas, she said gently. But Elise, you weren't even there. Then slowly, like someone untangling a wire, she told me what happened. Sometime after dinner, Tessa had wandered into the den, a glass of wine in hand, and started admiring the framed photos lining the mantel. She paused at one, a faded picture of Daniel's 5th birthday. Balloons, a homemade cake. A tiny girl in a blue dress, laughing too hard for the camera to catch her face clearly. "That's you, right?" she'd asked. No one answered. She pointed again. "Elise, your sister. The one who sat with my neighbor when she was dying." Daniel went pale. Mom's smile froze like a wax figure. Someone dropped a fork. Tessa looked around. "Wait, is that the same Elise you said was too intense to be around for the holidays?" Still no answer, but the silence was louder than anything they could have said. Tessa excused herself, gathered her coat, and left early. Later that night, she posted something. Just a few lines. No names, no blame, just truth. Sometimes families rewrite the people who hold them together. They call their grief heavy, their love inconvenient, and their absence disruptive. By morning, mutual friends had seen it. Cousins, colleagues, even a former neighbor commented, "Wait, is this about your sister?" The nurse. "I didn't even know you had one." The carefully curated version of the Monroe family, warm, united, generous, began to fracture. Quietly, like a hairline crack in a wine glass. Tessa's words didn't attack. They simply told the truth, and the truth did what it always does. It made the silence harder to maintain. That night, I didn't sleep right away. I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the wind push snow down the street in slow, whispering gusts. They had spent years pretending my presence was optional. Now, for the first time, they were learning how loud absence can be. The first email came the next morning. Subject line, "Let's reset things." No greeting, No apology. Just a string of carefully worded sentences that read like a corporate memo. Emotions were high. We value family. It's important to move forward. But buried halfway down between lines about holiday stress and miscommunication came the real reason. Would you be willing to reach out to Tessa? Just to clarify. Things got misrepresented. Not because they missed me, not because they understood, but because Daniel's girlfriend had become unpredictable and they needed the mess cleaned up. I didn't reply. The second message came that evening, from Dad Shorter. Less polished. We heard what Tessa posted. It's affecting people. Your brother's having trouble at work. Can we please keep this within the family? Keep what exactly? The truth that I existed, that I'd spent a decade wiring money in silence so they could keep pretending I didn't. That night, the doorbell rang. 3 slow chimes. No knock. Just a long, familiar silence hovering on the other side. I didn't move at first, just listened. When I finally stood and looked through the peephole, I wasn't surprised. My parents, Daniel, standing there in their nicest coats looking like a Norman Rockwell painting dipped in unease. Dad held a tin of cookies. Mom clutched her purse like it was a script. Daniel stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. I opened the door just an inch. Enough for the cold to slip in and sting my skin. Sweetheart, my mother began, her voice trembling with artificial warmth. We just want to talk? I didn't respond. Dad cleared his throat. We think this has all gotten out of hand. You've made your point. I tilted my head. Daniel finally looked up. You didn't have to go nuclear. Elise, I kept my voice low. I didn't say anything. They blinked. I opened the door just wide enough to step forward, not out but closer so they could hear me clearly. You spent years pretending I wasn't part of this family. You made it official this year. Mom opened her mouth. We didn't mean, I raised a hand. Not in anger, just to stop the noise. I'm not here for a scene, I said. I'm not angry. That part was true. I wasn't angry. I was done. I stepped back inside and gave them the only word I had left. No. Then I closed the door. Not a slam, not a statement, just a quiet final boundary. They stood out there for another minute, voices rising then dipping. I didn't listen. I walked back to my chair, sat down and picked up my tea, now cold. On the table beside me was the note I had written weeks earlier, folded and forgotten. Not a manifesto, not a letter. Just 3 lines I had scribbled to remind myself. You are not invisible. You are not responsible for their comfort. You do not owe them silence. Outside, the porch light flickered once, then steadied. Through the curtain, I watched as they turned and walked back to their car. They hadn't come to make peace. They had come to preserve the lie. But this time, I wasn't part of the cast. They didn't come back the next day. No more emails, no more texts. Just the strange hovering quiet of people recalibrating their narrative. I wasn't angry. I wasn't proud. Mostly, I was tired in that deep, quiet way your body feels after surviving something long and invisible. I started making space in my apartment. Not cleaning, just clearing. I put the Christmas gifts in a donation box, slid the suitcase back into the closet, dusted off the letter from Tessa still propped against the lamp. I read it again slowly. You didn't just sit with my grandmother when no one else did. You reminded her she mattered. You reminded me too. I didn't cry, but I did close my eyes and let the words land where no one had spoken to me in years, like I was someone real, not someone necessary. That afternoon, I framed the letter, hung it above my desk just beside the window where light moved across the wall like water. I didn't post anything, didn't text back. Cousins who suddenly wanted to reconnect. I let the silence grow. Not as punishment, but as reclamation. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't performing anymore. A week later, a final message arrived. We miss you. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can we start over? And then, beneath it, the true purpose. Tessa still hasn't taken the post down. It's affecting Daniel's opportunities. That was all I needed to see. I closed the message, blocked the address, then shut the laptop with both hands. Not in anger, but like closing the back cover of a book I no longer needed to reread. That night, I lit a candle and sat on the floor with a mug of tea. Strong, hot, unshared. Snow was falling outside again, slow and steady. No storm this time, just silence in motion. I thought about all the years I had tried to be small enough to fit into the spaces they gave me, about all the versions of myself I had edited down to keep the peace, and how peace had never actually existed, only performance. They hadn't come to see me that day. They came for the version of me who still believed love was earned through disappearing. But that girl was gone, and in her place was someone who had finally stepped out of the frame, not to scream, not to destroy, just to exist fully without asking permission. As I finished my tea, I looked around the room, still undecorated, still quiet. But for the first time, it didn't feel empty, it felt whole. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the hospice. A new patient had requested me by name. Someone remembered. Someone knew. I smiled soft private and reached for my coat. Outside, the world was white and quiet. Inside, I was still. And as I pulled the door closed behind me, I whispered the truth to no one but myself. I didn't vanish. They just built their holidays on the lie that I was never there. I arrived at the airport with a neatly packed suitcase, a week of PTO logged, and a quiet sense of hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. My dad had nearly died of a heart attack 2 weeks earlier, and in some strange, backward way, it had brought us all into the same room again. He was the one who suggested it, a family trip like we used to do. He even used that exact phrase. I'd stared at the phone in disbelief when he said it. I hadn't heard we in that tone since high school. So I said yes. I paused my work queue, filed backup contact plans, told my manager I'd be remote, unavailable. Family vacation, I told her. First in a decade. She smiled kindly and said, "Go be a daughter. I should have known better." When I got to the Delta check-in line, I gave them my name and confirmation code. The attendant typed, then frowned, typed again. She leaned toward the screen and gave me that practiced, soft, polite voice that always precedes bad news. "I'm sorry, but it looks like your ticket was canceled." I blinked. No, that can't be right. My father booked it for the 4 of us, my parents, my sister, and me. I confirmed it 2 days ago. She shrugged helplessly. All the others are active. Just yours is missing from the group manifest. It was canceled 3 days ago. I turned, scanning the terminal for their faces, and there they were. My parents stood about 30 feet away, chatting with my sister Madeline. Her long blonde hair was tied up in a neat bun, sunglasses perched on top like a crown. She was smiling. When our eyes met, she didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. I walked over slowly. Heart thudding. "My ticket's gone," I said flat. "It was canceled." My dad frowned. No, that doesn't make sense. I bought them all together. I paid for the group. I just spoke to the counter. Mine's the only one missing." He turned to my mom. "Gail, did you?" She shook her head, confused. "Of course not." I looked at Maddie. She didn't say a word, just smiled, tilted her head. That same look I remembered from childhood, the one she wore after hiding my college application essay, the one she had when she whispered to a boy I liked that I still wet the bed. "Maddie," I said. "You canceled it, didn't you?" My mom's voice sharpened. "Claire, don't start. She never wanted me to come. You know that." "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "It's just a mistake. Probably a glitch with the airline." I laughed short and bitter. "Right. And it just so happened to glitch on my ticket." My father checked his watch. "We're boarding soon. Maybe we can sort it out with the gate agent." "There are no seats left," I said, "unless one of you wants to stay behind." Silence. That was the moment I knew. I stood there in the center of the terminal, holding nothing but a carry-on bag and the echo of my own name. They didn't say, "We'll cancel the trip." They didn't say, "Come with us tomorrow." They just stared, waiting for me to make it easier for them. And I did. I told them to go. I watched them walk through security, just the 3 of them. No one turned around. Did she really cancel my ticket? Or did they never plan for me to come in the first place? I didn't always hate my sister. There was a time when I adored her. When she was born, I was 5, old enough to remember the hush that fell over the house before her arrival and the sobs my mother thought I couldn't hear. There had been a stillbirth the year before. A boy, no name ever spoken. After Maddie came, the sun seemed to return. Everyone said it. She was the miracle that healed us, that saved Mom, that made Dad smile again. I didn't mind sharing the light, not at first. But little things added up like dust under a rug. You feel it only when it softens your step. When I was 10, I made honor roll and got a certificate from the mayor. Maddie smeared ketchup on it before I could frame it. "It looks prettier," she said. When I was 12, I played my first piano recital. She unplugged the keyboard 5 minutes before my set. It was buzzing. She told my mother I performed with shaking fingers and no sound. Mom stroked her hair that night and told me not to be so emotional. "She's just little Claire. Let her learn," but she never did. She learned how to perform, how to cry at just the right moment, how to tell a version of a story that left out her fingerprints. When I was 15, a boy named Aaron walked me home from youth group. The next day, Maddie told my parents she saw me sneaking into his car. I was grounded for a week. Aaron never called again. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. "You're not even good at being liked," she said, twisting her friendship bracelet around her wrist. "Might as well let someone who is do the work." I told Mom. She smiled tightly and handed me a dish towel. "You girls are always competing. Let it go." By the time I was 17, I stopped talking about school wins. I stopped trying to bring home good news. Everything I did seemed to make Maddie louder, brighter, more wounded. When I got into UNC Chapel Hill on a scholarship, Maddie spent the week in bed crying about how no one would ever be proud of her. My parents didn't come to move-in day. "It's a hard time for Maddie," Mom had said. "She needs us close." That first night in my dorm, I made a cup of ramen and watched the hallway lights flicker. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to disappear without dying. Years passed. I built a life. Got my degree. Moved to Asheville. Learned to pay bills on time, show up early to meetings, send cards on birthdays that never got returned. Every now and then, I'd drive home for Thanksgiving. Maddie would roll her eyes when I walked in, sit at the opposite end of the table, interrupt me, mid-sentence with something louder. My parents didn't correct her. They passed the gravy and changed the subject. The last time I visited, she borrowed my laptop and forgot to return it for 2 weeks. When I got it back, half the keys were missing. My parents told me to be gracious. "You're so strong, Claire," Mom said. "She needs more help than you ever did." That sentence stayed with me. It wasn't just that they favored her. It was that they'd built a whole version of me that made her cruelty. Okay, if I had disappeared completely, would anyone have even noticed, or would they have just called it peaceful? I moved to Asheville for work and never moved back. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big fight, no final door slam. I just stopped offering pieces of myself no one asked for. I rented a small one-bedroom near the river. The ceiling fan rattled when it rained, and the kitchen tile was cracked under the sink, but it was mine. I kept a plant alive for 3 years, bought groceries on Sunday, paid my electric bill early. I didn't cut off my family. I answered calls. I sent cards on holidays. I mailed my dad a book once about heart health and scrawled a note in the cover. "Take care of yourself. Some of us still need you here." He never mentioned it. When Maddie graduated high school, she didn't have the grades for a university, so she enrolled in community college and stayed home. My mom posted pictures of her on Facebook every week. Maddie at the farmer's market. Maddie at church. Maddie with a rescued kitten. No mention of me, but I didn't expect it anymore. I had a life now, a quiet, careful one. I made real friends, not many, but the kind who remembered my coffee order and texted when it snowed to ask if I needed salt. I took walks in the botanical garden behind my building. I watched couples argue over mulch at Lowe's and thought, this is what peace looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. Then the call came. My mom's voice was tight, not crying but close. "Your dad's had a heart episode. It was serious. They brought him back, but it was close." I booked a train that night. The next morning, I was back in Greenville, standing in a beige hospital hallway, watching my father sleep beneath a plastic blanket. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maddie didn't look at me when I walked in. She scrolled her phone in the corner, earbuds in. I stayed a week, worked remote from their dining room table, kept the house quiet, made sure he took his meds. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge and replaced the batteries in the smoke detector, things no one noticed, but I did them anyway. At breakfast one morning, Dad looked at me across the table and said, "We should take a trip, all 4 of us. It's been too long." I waited for someone to laugh. No one did. He meant it. I hesitated. but then I thought about the way he gripped the stair rail now, how he winced when reaching for his coffee. Something in him had shifted, and maybe foolishly, I hoped something in them had too. So I said yes. I requested time off. I cleared my schedule, emailed my manager, updated my calendar. I packed simple linen shirts, a pair of sandals, a dog-eared novel I'd been saving for years. I wanted to believe this time might be different, that maybe after everything we could sit on a porch somewhere and talk like people who remembered each other's first names. But when the time came when I stood in that airport with a bag in my hand and a ticket that didn't scan, all I saw was Maddie smiling. And all I felt was stillness, not rage, not hurt. Just the quiet confirmation that nothing had changed. When did I stop trying to be seen and just start watching from afar? 3 days after they left, my phone buzzed just past 5 a.m. It was my mother missed calls. 7 of them. Then one text. "Call me now, it's an emergency." I didn't think. I called. She answered on the first ring, voice low and uneven. "It's your dad," she whispered. "Something's wrong." My chest tightened. "Is he in the hospital again?" "No, he's stable. But his pills are disappearing." I sat up fully awake. "What do you mean disappearing?" "His morning medication, the carvedilol. There were 15 left when we packed. Now there's barely 4, and we haven't skipped any." My mind clicked through possibilities. Miscounting housekeeping mistake. Then I heard her voice drop lower. I went into Madeline's room to borrow sunscreen. She wasn't there. Her bag was unzipped. I found the pills, all of them stuffed in a side pocket. I didn't speak right away. I could hear the ocean outside her hotel window, waves rolling in like breath. "She could have killed him," she said finally, and I couldn't tell if it was grief or disbelief in her voice. "She wouldn't have taken them by accident," I said. "No," my mother said softly. "No, she wouldn't have. I told her not to confront Maddie." "Not yet. Not while they were stuck abroad. They needed to document everything. Take photos. Secure the pills. Wait until they got home. She'll talk her way out of it," I said. "She always does, but not if you have evidence." My mother hesitated. "Your father wants to speak to her tonight. He says she needs to hear it from him." I wanted to stop them. I knew how this would go. But I also knew my father quiet until he wasn't, and when he wasn't, it was already too late to redirect. That night, they called again. This time, it was Dad. His voice shook. "She exploded," he said. "Claire, I've never seen anything like it." He told me they sat her down calmly, just the two of them. They showed her the pills. Asked why, Maddie laughed. Then she screamed. She accused them of betrayal, said they were trying to humiliate her, called them liars, said she saw them replacing her with me, said Dad should have died if he was just going to bring me back into their lives. She started throwing things, he said, a lamp, her shoes. She picked up the hotel phone and screamed at the front desk. Security was called, then the police. They arrested her. My dad whispered, "Your sister." They took her in cuffs. "Claire." She kept shouting your name, like this was about you. I didn't know what to say. She wasn't shouting at me. She was shouting at the version of me that had never existed, the phantom sister who took nothing but was blamed for everything. "She's been released," he added, "but we're keeping separate rooms now. The hotel helped us change floors." There was a pause. We didn't know," he said, voice cracking. "We really didn't know." I almost believed him. But they had known. Somewhere deep down beneath the excuses and the staged smiles they'd known for years. They just never said it aloud until the consequences knocked. What happens when the golden child finally gets exposed and she turns on the people who created her? The next call came less than 24 hours later. This time, my mother wasn't whispering. Her voice was high-sharp with panic. "Claire, we can't find our passports." I blinked. "What?" "Both of them gone and our wallets. They were in the drawer by the bed last night now. They're just gone." I stood in the middle of my kitchen, still holding my coffee. The steam curled past my face. "Did you check with the front desk?" "Housekeeping." "We did nothing." Turned in Ron's ID. My credit cards, everything all gone. I didn't say anything. My mom's voice broke. "We think she took them." It made sense after what happened. After being arrested, after being told for the first time in her life that she had gone too far, and now she was making sure they couldn't leave without her. She said my mom whispered that if we ever chose you again, we'd regret it. I sat down, slowly. It wasn't about pills anymore, or even rage. It was control. The only thing Maddie had ever needed more than attention. We're stuck. Claire, no IDs, no cards, no passports. We can't fly. We can't book a new hotel. We can't even rent a car to get to the consulate. We have nothing. The line went quiet for a moment, then she added softly, "We need your help." There it was. The words I'd never heard from her mouth. Not when I moved out. Not when I graduated. Not when I got promoted. Not when I sat alone at Thanksgiving while they took family photos without me. We need you. I wired them money through Western Union. Enough to get to the embassy. Rebook a hotel. Then I stayed on the phone, walking them through the steps. I looked up the consulate hours, drafted an affidavit for lost documents, pulled up a guide to emergency passport replacement, and emailed it in a PDF. I didn't scold. I didn't gloat. I treated it like I would for a stranger who needed help. Later that night, my dad called. "I want to say I'm sorry," he said. "We should have seen it earlier." There was a pause. "We just didn't know how to admit it, that we'd been wrong." I let him speak. "We called you dramatic," he said. "We called you jealous, but you were just telling the truth, weren't you?" "Yes," I said. Another silence. Then his voice quieter. "And you still helped us. I wasn't going to leave you stranded. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had. I didn't say it, but I would have blamed myself. Not because I owed them, but because I couldn't become the person they once accused me of being cruel by nature. Vindictive. Small, I wasn't small. I just remembered too much." Maddie didn't speak to them for the rest of the trip. She refused to give back the passports. Eventually, she dropped them at the front desk without a word. No apology. No explanation. My parents flew home 2 days later quieter than I'd ever seen them. They didn't call when they landed, but 2 mornings after that, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was the book I had sent my dad, the one about heart health I thought he'd forgotten. There was a note in the cover in his handwriting. "Thank you for keeping me alive in every way that mattered." Could I have walked away this time? Yes, but maybe the point wasn't proving them wrong, just letting them see. I'd been right all along. Maddie didn't unravel. She detonated. Once they got back home, she refused to speak to them for 2 days. Then, as if those hours of silence had sharpened into blades, she began lashing out, not with words, but with control. She took their car keys and hid them twice. Once, when my father had a follow-up cardiology appointment, she smashed a set of dishes when my mom asked her to lower the volume on the TV. One night, she dragged a chair into the hallway, sat down, and played the same 3-second clip on her phone on loop until dawn. I told my parents to document everything. I told them it wasn't just tantrums anymore. It was a pattern. It was dangerous. They agreed, quietly, carefully. Then it escalated again. She came at my father with a kitchen knife during an argument. It wasn't deep, just a scrape along his forearm, but that didn't matter. He was bleeding, and it was enough. They called the police. Maddie was arrested this time for assault. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She just stared at them like they'd betrayed her for the last time. They pressed charges. Not because they wanted to punish her, but because it was the only way to get her out of the house. They filed a restraining order, changed the locks, hired an attorney. I didn't go down for the hearing. I watched it all unfold from my apartment in Asheville, tracking court documents, reading texts that came in like storm warnings. "She's still calling from the county jail." Should we answer? I told them no. She'd had their attention for years. Let the silence sit where it belonged now. When the eviction order was finalized, I offered to have them come stay with me for a while. Not out of guilt, just to give them time to breathe, and maybe quietly to see who I had become when I wasn't being erased. They arrived 2 days later with 2 duffel bags and the look of people who had just crawled out of something they built themselves. I set up the guest room with fresh towels, stocked the fridge with decaf, and left a spare key in a drawer they could find without asking. We didn't talk about Maddie. We didn't talk about much at first. But on the 3rd morning, my dad sat beside me on the back porch, watching the fog lift off the Blue Ridge foothills. He handed me a mug of coffee and cleared his throat like he wasn't sure if he deserved to speak. "You were never the problem," he said. I nodded. My mother joined us a little later. She didn't say anything, just wrapped a cardigan tighter around her shoulders and looked out past the trees like she was trying to see her way back to a version of herself that hadn't believed the worst things. That afternoon, I pulled out a small envelope from my desk drawer. Inside was a printout of their return flight information. I'd booked it for the following Monday. I left it on the kitchen table under a smooth river stone, the kind people put on graves or promises. On the morning of their departure, I hugged my mother. She held on a second longer than I expected. My father looked like he wanted to say something else, but I didn't ask him to. At the door, I handed them the envelope again. "There's a second copy in your suitcase," I said, "in case this one gets lost." He looked at it, then looked at me. "Thank you," he said. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded and closed the door after them. I never disappeared. They just built a world that was easier when I did. But now they know I was always here, watching, waiting, and finally choosing not to vanish.